with the April Finance Committee for the City of Yachts. Got it? There we go. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we'll start with any announcements and correspondence.
Introduction to your attendance.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Well, before we go into announcements and correspondence, we'll do a roll call. We have Tom Lorenzen, Finance Committee member, myself, Bobby Price, City Manager, Julie Ectum, Finance Committee member, Neil Morphus, City Staff, and Kimmy Jackson, City Staff. And in the audience, we have David Buchwald, City Staff, and Mayor Craig Birdie. So welcome, everybody. Now we'll go to correspondence and attendance. Thank you, Kimmy. Any correspondence? No? No? Public comment online?
No, it's all you.
It's all us, okay. Okay, well, we will go straight to new business then. And I'm going to share my screen here for that. The first item we have on new business is a city council goal review. So in January and February of 2025, the city council sat through a couple work sessions to put their 2025 goals into place. And with those goals, there were larger overarching goals, distilled down into more tangible, actionable items, action items, and deliverables. And we really put an emphasis into making them SMART goals, measurable and time-bound and specific, so that it would flow into an annual workflow. And I've been sharing this with all of the varying commissions that have a hand in helping us achieve these goals through their work as being on a commission for the city. And just to show a graphic on this and how we're putting these city council goals into this workflow is step one is the city council. They set the goals and adopt them. Then we take those city council goals and objectives and move them into our city staff work plan. And then city staff, along with myself, identifies the work that we will be doing, which department will be doing what, or we need to be hiring consultants, and where we could utilize support in achieving the goals. And then we will be looking to all of the commissions and staff in the November timeframe and really asking them to sit down and think about the goals that they've come up with throughout the year, so that those can be passed on to the city council for when they are discussing their goals, and they can be taken into consideration and as recommendations for the goals that they put into the next year that will become our work plan. So it's kind of a cycle, and we're all working together on that cycle. And like I mentioned, I've done this presentation highlighting the goal sections of each of the commissions so far. And now there is a goal that is very focused on financial sustainability. So I am going to pull those goals up right now. And this is the tracking sheet that I'm using for the goals. We use these not only for placing the goals, but also we'll be using them for tracking. And so we can see we have the larger focus area, and then the goal and actions, and then deliverables, and who's in charge of those. And then we'll give quarterly updates on them as we make progress. And you'll see here we have a focus area of infrastructure, and the goal is achieve water sustainability. And there's several action items that break down into that goal. And a lot of this was discussed will continue to be discussed in both planning and Public Works and Streets Commission, along with city staff and council and the finance committee, because as we move forward, this will be a very expensive goal category. So we'll need to make sure that the finance committee is really aware of all of these items on this goal section and prepared to help us find creative ways to fund projects and, you know, out of the box thinking and being aware that these are long-term goals as we make short-term decisions. And the next when you can see in here, goal 1.3 is create and implement a street rehabilitation plan and communicate that sequence to the public. And that's creating a 1, 3, and 5-year plan, and then regularly feature what's coming up for street and infrastructure. And this goal will turn over into the next part of our conversation for the meeting today. So it is a city goal to be really aware of our city's streets and what their implementation is, and then we have to figure out how we're going to pay for those. So that's part of our conversation a little bit later. Livability is one of the city council's goals, and that kind of distills down into provide safe access to and use of city infrastructure, parks, and trails. And there's several action items and deliverables that break down with those goals. Things that both the Public Works and Streets Commission will be really looking at, as well as our Public Works Department, our city staff, and the Parks and Commons Commission will be playing some roles in helping us achieve these varying goals and action items. Housing supply, identify ways to expand the housing supply and diversify options in housing. And there's 3 action items underneath that goal section, along with quite a few deliverables that are specific to those. The Planning Commission is looking really closely at these. I think as we get to real solid and concrete suggestions, I think it will be wise for the Finance Committee to look over the suggestions that come our way and make sure that the city is being responsible and fiscally responsible in all of these different types of choices and decisions that are going to be in front of us. Planning Commission currently is working with Cascadia Partners, and I think the suggestions and implementation that come from that will encompass a lot of the long-range planning. And I believe the Planning Commission is also looking at other things, utilizing these goals as kind of kickoff points, like, you know, what would be some different public-private partnerships to exploring incentives or penalties for owners of abandoned houses and properties, and how to initiate condemnation regulations and understanding the legal restraints in that, how to get some of that housing inventory up and rolling for workforce housing, hopefully. And then this item right here, to perform a capacity analysis of the existing water system to determine its maximum water delivery capability. This, I think, really is going to need a consultant to help us with. And the point of that is to really ensure that we know what our water system is capable of supporting, and how many dwellings in the city limits we have, and what additional water support we would need for additional dwellings as we're looking at expanding housing. Environmental stewardship is a goal section, and the goal is to be environmentally aware in all we do. There's several action items in there where this is I've seen a lot of kind of crossing of in collaboration potentials for different commissions to help us with these items. And we have a couple commissioners that are really excited about looking at what kind of environmentally sustainable construction products could be used, environmental impact and on land use and overall project design. And one of the deliverables for that is to develop a checklist of acceptable considerations. And that's going to be a good one for some commissioners to help us with and work with our city staff on. Fiscal sustainability, this is the one that lands really specifically with this commission and our city staff, and effectively manage and plan for the city's financial needs. And the action items and deliverables for this, the first was designate the finance committee as the audit review committee, which we did. We achieved a goal already. Good job. That will be, the ordinance will be that we've all had a chance to put our input in, was reviewed at the city council meeting in March, and will go before public hearing and vote on the 19th of April during their city council meeting. Next, we have explore and implement strategies to ensure long-term sustainability and funding of our water reserves while continuing a contractual agreement with the Sheriff's Department. So this really is, how do we do all the things? I mean, you know, we want to make sure that our water is we're putting towards those reserves. We're having the water sustainability funding happening and support happening, but we're also able to have a sheriff's contract. So thinking about how we can maintain that, I think a lot of that conversation will continue with our budgeting process here that we're embarking in, and any other kind of creative thoughts that the finance committee might have. But I'll just go through all of these, and then we can kind of open up conversation too. Item 5.3 is explore options for extending the service life and securing funding for upgrades of a wastewater treatment plant. So identify likely system failure points, where and how we are going to replace the plant and when. Create a plan for this and have it in writing. And explore county district partnerships with sewer treatment for the county between Walport and Yachats. Looks like I left out Yachats on that, but I know when we discussed this, we were thinking that maybe the water plant or wastewater treatment plant had a little shorter lifespan, but in further discussions with Dave and the work that they're really actively doing on the wastewater treatment plant all the time, that you quoted 50 years you think you got in that baby still, if you keep it up the way you're keeping it up.
Yes.
Yes.
We just put, finished a couple. Just this week.
So I think we're achieving some of our goal already by, we can make note of the different work that you're doing in CIP stuff to keep that plant up and running for a long time. But I think, you know, a interesting one in there is and I've heard before from members of our finance committee, is the exploring county district partnerships with the sewer treatment and having that service between Walport and Yachats, and what that would take, that partnership would take. So that would be something to definitely be considering. I don't know where to start with that. Just with conversations, I guess. Do you have any ideas, Tom?
Yeah, several, but I don't know. They're fleshed out enough to think about them.
Yeah.
That's the only way that the county is going to be able to develop housing between here and Walport, is to expand sewage treatment. So there should be federal dollars and state dollars and county dollars that will make that happen. We can't look to Lincoln, to us and Walport to do it. I think between the three government entities above us, they should be able to cobble together enough money to get the line in and the laterals so that they can start developing property. They already have their water. They just need sewer.
Do we have the capacity for that to take on more?
We have room for another batch reactor or another basin. So, and we're not, what capacity are we using of the two already?
Right now, I think we're at somewhere between 35% and 45%.
And so we could go 3 times what we're already producing.
But Tom, if I may speak on that, our bottleneck is gonna be the solids disposal.
No question.
Mhm,
But if a big group of people get together, you can take
That's right.
a big plot of land. We
mhm,
only need about 20 acres,
mhm.
lifetime use. Flat land.
We talked once about centrifuges to get a lot of the solids out. And I'm sure somebody engineering wise has solved that problem where we getting a lot of the solids out of the system before you even turn loose the bugs.
And what about the investment in doing a grade A?
Oh, doing a class A biosolid,
Yeah, class A biosolids.
that's also a possibility. And
If we were gonna be collecting
with
more.
your skills to convince people that it's safe.
PR, it's all about the PR.
So there's all kinds of things that we could look into, for sure.
Mhm, mhm. Who would be the first point of contact on something like that? A commissioner or a public works director or in the county?
Before we have a functioning county government, is if Claire Hall retires finally, this is her last term. She said she's done.
I don't know.
Told Quentin that, so that could be 4 years from now when we start getting a little more active county commissioners
Mhm,
that could work proactively. Right now, we're basically a status quo county, have been for 10 years,
mhm.
no major changes. Hopefully,
I think they'd be feeling the pressure for additional housing.
and they don't, yeah, well, that's the key we all
Mhm.
are all trying to solve. But in order to have affordable housing, you need cheap land and cheap construction. There is no cheap construction on the Oregon coast. Anyone who's lived here more than an hour and a half knows that there's 80% of the work's done by 20% of the people, and they're very expensive. So it comes down to where do we get cheap land?
Mhm.
And the only place is outside of Yachats and Walport. That's where the cheap land is. That would lead to affordable housing.
Mhm.
And you can't do septic tanks. So to me, the prerequisite is sewer lines. Then you can really get on to expanding urban growth boundaries and getting sewage collected and move on.
I don't, it's very preliminary, but there is discussion of limiting PFAS in the effluent. And I don't know what, the cost for doing that will be, how big a problem it will be for us. I'm sure there's something in our water, but
It'll probably get shut down for 4 years. I don't think he's gonna make anybody pursue that.
I would like to speak to that. Yes, I did read an article. Still. Issues concerning that, at least in this political.
Good and bad.
So probably commissioners then are gonna be the talking point on that.
Does it ever show up on their agendas?
Housing?
Oh, the gap between Walport and Yachats.
What they've seen, yeah,
other than in case you're mental.
yeah, yeah.
Which are limited because
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Who goes to those meetings? Do people from the city go?
I tune in online to them as often as I can. I'll be on the next meeting, listening in, because they'll do the final sign off, the sign of our.
Is this about the time of year we do the joint meeting with them? Usually it's the March, April. Haven't seen anything on the agenda lately.
Mm-mm.
Nothing's come through.
Yeah.
Joint meeting as they come to present to us, or what's the joint meeting? Like,
They present it, but they do it here. I think it was online during COVID, but
I think it was.
yeah.
But they used to come here, set up,
Mhm.
they have a joint meeting with our council, and then they would go into their regular business.
oh,
It was always, they always left us feeling like,
Are we here?
yeah, we were second-class citizens.
It's kind of weird.
And there were very little on the agenda that was of joint interest to the two of us. But, you know, every year's a different opportunity. You should never quit after the first try. You should keep trying, keep trying, keep trying.
They have their hands full now. No one's having joint meetings.
yeah, I hadn't, that's the first I've heard of it. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I can reach out to them too and ask about it. So 5.4 is document the urban renewal district expiration and develop a preliminary replacement funding plan. Discover what options there are for continuing on or starting anew. Tom, I feel like you'd be wise to this topic.
You can't continue on the one that we have.
Mm.
It expires when 7.8 million is collected. That's the law. But you can have a new one. And you don't have to wait until the old one's expired. Walport has 4 of them in place. So we could be creative and dream up something that could cover places where houses could be built. I don't know that it can overlap with the one we have, so we'd have to be a little careful. That one was pretty well drawn to get all the money possible.
Mm.
Now we need to draw something that does something else.
So that one's pretty concentrated in town, right downtown, so maybe like on the north end or south end of.
That's the current one that we have.
Mhm,
I think we want something that doesn't focus on downtown,
mhm.
that focuses on where we could build. So that's a possibility.
Housing or city infrastructure?
Housing, I'm thinking, I mean, that seems to be a
Mhm.
real need.
Mhm.
And now, and if we can't do it, that gives us kind of directions to go on our water capacity.
Mhm.
But if we think we can do it, that compounds our water capacity discussions. So we have to get really creative on that. So I think it's really important to know, can we build on Horizon Hill reasonably well, and north, you know, that area of the city that our buddy's talking about above Sierra and all that. We just have to know, because that's where the land is in our
Mhm.
city limits.
Mhm.
So,
What's the process to start anew?
the original one that we formed in 2005 should have some files left behind somewhere in the
Yeah, I
archives.
have.
Was reasonably inexpensive to do. Did not require a vote of the city, it required a vote of the council.
Mhm.
And we had a consultant. It was okay, you know, he did a reasonably good job. He only missed the starting point by a year when the money would flow. But that can happen if you're not focused on when counties bill taxes and collect taxes and all that stuff and get the measurement points on property. You could easily miss a year. That's what he did, missed the starting point by a year. Then it was impacted by the 2006 through 2009 real estate recession, which was a shame that we started it right when the market collapsed and the securitized mortgage obligations evaporated. So that's why we've been behind the curveball ever since, the 8 ball. So I shouldn't say it wouldn't, it probably wouldn't happen again. We could do another one. And figure out what we want to do with the tax increment financing. My guess is we want to do housing and water tanks. And I don't personally think we need 1 million gallon tanks. I think we need to spread our risk and have multiple smaller tanks. Ever since I went through Rio de Janeiro, I've been convinced that's the way to go. They have all these 25,000 liter water tanks spread all over the hills of the favelas where the slums are. That's where their water supply is. Hundreds of these things. It's all gravity flow. It's amazing.
As in,
Third world common sense.
yeah, well, every time I drive through Portland or when I was in Seattle, I noticed like in several of the neighborhoods, the taller ones that are like just, they're probably 250 million or not 1,000 gallons, not million gallons, but yeah, they're placed all around. And just right in the middle of neighborhoods.
If we did one of those every 5 years for a while, instead of trying to do them all at once, funded by a new urban renewal district, that certainly could work well.
Then you could have a schedule for replacement, so you're not always having to worry about a giant one.
In preparation for the day when the government of Oregon, state government, finally relents on transfer rental taxes and says, okay, you can spend some of it on infrastructure because tourist towns like us have 2 populations. I think we need to know the equivalent population of our hotel population. I don't really know how to get it. I can estimate it using government water standards for how many. I think the average household here is 1.8 people in yachts, and then you have all these water statistics for residences. So you can get the equivalent water usage for a hotel and kind of convert it into the equivalent population. But if we knew that, we'd be prepared for ratioing our monies when either we did a URD or if we start using transient rental income money to fund infrastructure. Because that day is going to come. I don't know when, but I think it will come. We'll get some relief.
I'm gonna send you an email to look at regarding those things. So,
And while I'm on a roll.
yeah,
Please, I won't be here forever. Keep in mind, those 4 properties up north at the city limits, 40 consume 40% of them. And if we had a water system that was 60% of its current size, it changes all the dynamics of how you develop that water source for future homes. Changes it dramatically. You only need to do basically half of what you're doing today. And we could lease those to our neighborhood water system. They need the revenue. We can live without the revenue for a short term while we take the 1 million gallon tank offline, because we got to do that at some point. Replace its storage somehow and smooth out that demand on our system while we're building our need to replace the lost, actually it's lost 1,250,000, isn't it, or 1,500,000?
If you do both of
250.
those,
Yeah, the million tank and the 500,000 tank up there on Radar Road are both debt, basically to us.
quarter, yeah.
So 6 250s would replace those, and we could do that over 20 years. And if we did something with our neighboring water system, we'd have the capacity to be just fine all throughout the construction period while we rented that 40% of our usage out. It could be done.
So you're thinking more of a temporary agreement or rentals versus or lease versus like a permanent transfer?
I was thinking of intermediate, long-term rental agreement for customers that replaces the water they use, so we don't have to refine it and process it during the time that we're tearing down our 1-million-gallon tank and doing something else. It could work.
Mm.
We're giving up 40% of the volume and we're giving up 25% of the revenue. On the water side, we're not giving up anything on the sewer side, because they don't have a sewer system. But we could make the numbers work over the long haul. It is doable.
So lease it out for that same 20%?
No, I would lease the rights to service those customers for maybe a 5-year option. Well, it depends how long we think it's gonna take to do our revised master plan to get our water storage back up after we take those tanks offline. That won't be easy to do. But they don't necessarily have to be the same time frame. They just have to approximate the same time frame.
What's your sense on the League of Oregon Cities transient lodging tax?
I've heard for a couple of weeks, and when I submitted our letter. I looked at the letters, that there were 50 letters from hotel management, companies, proprietors, etc. They really went in full court press, make their voices heard, and we were to these cities.
Is the chicken little, the sky is falling? If we do this? Is that their position, basically?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could counter that position by severely restricting vacation rentals in the residential zones. Drive the business to the hotels.
Is what they would like anyhow. And it's that organized opposition is the hotel. The heck of a deal where you can have a tax and then you get to use the tax for your own marketing purposes. There's no other system that's like that. You buy groceries, you get a tax on it, and they use it to market the grocery stores. But I know our representatives, the Senate and Representative Gomberg are both supportive of giving it more flexibility. I think it will happen. My letter was around, we have to build infrastructure to maximum capacity. We can't, maximum demand. So we can't build it for some level
Right.
use. We have to build it really big, and that costs us a lot of money. We can't pull it out of the ground in the winter.
That's right.
And that's where the real costs are.
Those 3 months,
Yeah.
3 or 4 months.
But other cities, I think we're piggybacking on somebody like Newport, who really has, very serious issues in terms of how busy they are, their need for water, the need for law enforcement. A lot of the letters from the cities were, 60% of our activity in the summer for public safety is from out of city residents and centers. I'm still hopeful, but it wouldn't surprise me if we didn't get it. I haven't heard in the last 3 weeks still where they're at.
Another thing I was thinking about on my walk over here is Pam and I went to the doctor's appointment in Corvallis a couple of weeks ago. And we stayed in a hotel in Lebanon rather than drive home because we had a 3 o'clock afternoon appointment and a 10 o'clock the next morning, 2 appointments back to back, 2 days. This is kind of stupid to drive back to Yahats and turn. So we stayed at the S Western Boulder something in Lebanon. Nice place. I looked at my bill to see what they charge for tax when we checked out. And they have infrastructure fees
Mm.
on their lodging bills. And you see that with the car rentals, you'll see facility fees and things like that. And it got me to thinking, I wonder if we could do an infrastructure fee, not an increase in the tax. Leave the tax at 9 and then do maybe a 2% infrastructure fee on the guests that flows into our capital reserves to provide the infrastructure to service their needs. So it's not unheard of. I don't know if it's unheard of in Lincoln County, but it's certainly around.
2%?
Hmm?
2% is what you,
Let's,
yours,
for example,
yeah. I haven't heard of that one.
the thought,
Yeah.
we could do that. We could, we can't, state law does not allow us to lower the tax, but, conceivably, you could lower from 9 to 8 and add 3. Or something like that, if you could make the numbers work. But something to think about, that rather than feed them to death or tax them to death, don't raise the tax. Come up with something else,
Mhm.
think outside the box. We could call it the poop and flesh fee or something. We used to call it the poop and pavement commission, so
That's where we need it.
there's the other.
With the urban renewal district, you mentioned, you used a consultant. Is that recommended or necessary, or what's the consensus on, that experience?
Having been a consultant for 10 years, I don't like them very much. They're based, most of the professional engagements I had with major companies were defensive in nature. They hired us so they could say they hired us, but they had no intention of listening to us. So it's really a sleazy business.
Mhm.
And you don't necessarily get very much out of it if you're the one writing the check. I would think we could resurrect the documents that we had before and do it on our own. Maybe with Ross's help,
Mhm.
Good
we
to see.
could have a lowball approach
Mhm.
to having an urban renewal district, or maybe even Cutter can help us because he's got 4 of them.
Mhm.
We only have 1.
Mhm.
We can jury rig an application without having to spend consulting fees. Because we may get a guy or a woman who is like the last one that made a year mistake and it cost us like $400,000.
Ooh. Ooh.
They still get paid.
Can you pull those documents?
Mhm.
Start looking at them? Okay. Perfect. And so, goal 5.5, or action item rather, 5.5 is develop and implement a criteria for the distribution of fund requests from visitor amenities. And also the community, support line item. I'll need to add to that, but, this is, kind of something that's been talked about in variations, and definitely something that I see would be beneficial. We've had, few different organizations request funds from the transient lodging tax during the budget season. And we get, organizations asking for support throughout the year, and we have, allocated funds for that and to do that. And I, support doing that. I just think that doing it in a, grant format would be more transparent and even and fair, and there could be guidelines and an application process, and then a set time when that grant opens and it's well published that it's happening and that you can apply for these funds, but it's a timed out thing. It's not just an organization because they know that there's budget season and there's funding available coming and asking for funds, or organizations just coming at different times throughout the year asking for funds and support. And me making the decision, I have them fill out an application and I have them do reports, but this could be we could have a grant review committee, and it's not just me making the decision, because sometimes I want to say no, but I don't like sometimes, but there's pressures to not, and so I feel like it would take a lot off of my shoulders to do this, and it just being a very transparent process. An equal, equitable process, because somebody might come at the beginning of the year, ask for more money, and then somebody comes in the end of the year and they have a great cause, but they've already had all these other people ask for money. And
Kimmy and I are the only two people here that have been around when we used to spend more time talking about $1,000 to my sister's place than we talked about 4 million for a water tank or.
really,
Oh, it was horrible.
so I don't want that.
You don't want the budget committee or the council
Mhm.
to make the decisions.
Right. What I'm looking for is just like a process that they have to apply for, and a timeline, and then like a selected grant review committee, kind of like the Lincoln County Economic Development
That'd be great.
Alliance
Like
does.
that could work, because you don't want the budget committee doing it.
Mhm.
That was awful.
Mhm. I don't want to do that. I definitely don't want to do that. I just.
Like the Cape Perpetua and
Mhm,
stuff like that.
mhm. I just want it to be fair, because I mean, I definitely support giving them those funds, but not every organization knows that that's an option,
Right.
just because they are in the know.
That should be talked about before we get to that point.
Yeah. Limit it to no more than 10% of the pot for one particular grant,
Mhm.
then you don't have to worry about running out of money during the year. And form an advisory group to review it quarterly, the requests. That could work.
Do you think that they should be just an open and a quarterly review process, or like a one-time, once a year request?
You're dealing with other volunteer groups,
Mm-hmm.
so if you put all your eggs in one basket once a year, you lose some along the way, they won't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
There, I think multiple times you open it up during the year, the better.
Okay. I like to have the 10% max for anyone too, because it gives them guidelines in there
Might
too.
be a different number, but.
Yeah, just some a max for any one application. I think could be fair.
It's good if they all knew how many other people are asking for money, so they know it's not just them, like,
Mhm.
cause I have no idea how many people are
Mhm.
coming in and asking. The budget committee doesn't know that then.
Mhm. No, because it's in the how it sits now is in the city manager's discretionary fund line item.
Um,
And they come in and I have them submit an application, and then give me a review, or a review on how they spent their money in the year and what they did and activities, a report.
Mm.
This would make it that much more
Yeah.
streamlined.
Documented.
Mhm. So those are the fiscal sustainability items for the year for us to ponder on throughout the year and work on throughout the year. There was, oh yeah, so then there's public awareness, deliver efficient, effective, transparent municipal services and alignment, synchronize and update city policies and administrative rules. So I think we should go to our next item on the agenda now, and then we'll speed through that and get to our approval of the CIP budget for fiscal year 24 and 25, or 25, 26, I guess we're in. And then so that we can make a recommendation for the city council's April meeting. Dave, would you like to come up?
So since my co-partner is not here today, I will venture to be as eloquent a speaker as he is. And just talk a little bit about his concerning the street stuff. The bottom line is we have a lot of projects that we do maintenance, repair stuff, and then also capital projects as well. And it really is a funding issue. Let's start with the maintenance part. I compiled this list over the last couple of weeks in between things, and I came up with 25 of the most serious projects that need to get done. And what this is basically next year's stuff. This is not including what's being scheduled to be paid for this fiscal year. So none of that, there's some major stuff out there that's looks horrible. It's not on this list because it's due to be done before June 30th and invoiced and so on. So what's coming up though, the top 7 projects came up to 113,000 with my guesstimation, what it would cost starting July 1st and so on. So that's the rough stuff. When I went around with the paving company, they said they said they're not trying to sell us asphalt. But the fact is that the longer we wait, the worse it gets, the more expensive it's gonna be. And so on. And so I put this priority list in there, a bunch of 1s, 2s, 1s being the worst, 2s being so on, and 3s the least. But that's kind of the scale for the next 3 years also in there. So everything, that 25 items is what I think we ought to address over the next 3 years. Some of the stuff they said, if we get it now, it won't have to bring in a grinder and take it up. We can do a thick overlay. I've talked about this before, and please, if I start wandering, let me know. But while I was out there talking with them, they said, well, part of your issue is you've got 3/4 inch overlay right here, and he bends down and he picks up a piece of it. He said, this is not going to work for you. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that road was paved 15 years ago. And so on. But he said, you ought to be getting 20, 25 years out of fresh pavements. And that's why you'll see on a lot of our bids now, we're going to a 3-inch instead of 2, 1, or 3/4 inch stuff. And that's just because of what it is. We pay a little more now, but then it lasts a lot longer. Because 10 years from now, that stuff is going to be probably double. Who knows, right? So we need this kind of stuff. That's the paving, right? Then there's all the man hours and the other stuff, the potholes that we all dread and all of that. Well, I generally don't focus our use of street time and materials and stuff until the last 2 months, generally mid-April to towards the end of May. And then June is usually ate up with street painting and prepping for the summertime. Right now, it may look like we have a lot of money in there, but then everything gets, I try not to go over. I'm just gonna say, I try not to go over, but I budget everything for the time so that we end up with a flat budget, but we need more. We need more because there's more to get done. And because of the good graces of the city, we now have almost a fully staffed public works. So we have the people to start doing that as well. And I'd hate to be restricting them to other things because there's not funding. But then we look at our storm drain side of it. If you read kind of what Rick wrote, it's very true that we have right now in there's about $950,000 of projects in our storm drain master plan that's still under construction. That the master plan is still being worked on. I think there's more than that. There's some projects or some pipes that are being removed because they don't exist, but there's other projects being added to it that are going to be fairly good sized projects and so on. And so that's going to be even more right there. In that it's stated like the city should be budgeting about 90,000 a year for storm drain CIPs. I think it's probably going to be a little more than that by the time we're done. If the city wants to do the upgrades. That's why we do a master plan, tells us, let the engineers tell us where these problems are. And so, you know, we look at the storm CIPs and it's got all this stuff on there. Do we need 36-inch pipes? I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but they're hydraulic people, they're hydrology people. They seem to say, yeah, you do for what you get. Well, that's not for me to decide. What's for me to help is that these are where we can address the best. And that's going to require money, a lot of money. And that's just the storm drain side. So in all, you know, hat in hand, all that, I'm saying that we've got a lot of projects that we got to do, but we're limited by, you know, you guys are the ones that come up with the money. It's not me. But I know that if it's not in the budget, I'm not going to spend it. So that's kind of my song and dance for leading with it. But I will go back to the stuff. You guys have seen all the potholes in town. Your street has some large patching that needs to be done. The other,
I will never call you and tell you that.
no, and I only say that because you guys have seen it. Julie, you've seen it, these places, and the fact that we're still scheduling, or we have some scheduled to be done before June is just totally awesome. Because it's been, the last projects we did paving was East Second Street, but that really wasn't address a paving issue. And the same with First Street, the end of First Street. That was a sort of one, but that was more of, we needed to get something done there. But other than that, 2010 is when we got a lot of other paving. And that's at their end of life stuff. Just because back then paving was done a little different. But now this stuff we should get 20 years plus on the new stuff as a whole. But what may happen is we'll end up with large patches that are there and then the stuff around it is going on.
Are there some streets that have such little traffic that a 1 inch or 2 inch would be enough?
Possibly, but a 2 inch is where we would start with that.
Okay.
And I did take that into consideration on that list. If it's not that well traveled, a very good example is the upper portion of King Street. There's only 2 or 3 houses up there, I think, but the road's buckling. That puts it up at the top of the list to get done, because buckling is a sign of bad base, which could mean something a lot worse.
Or the hillside's moving.
If that falls under or a lot worse. I'm not qualified to say how much you can do about that. So that's where that stuff comes from. Yes, I've looked at that. I will strongly discourage anything less than 2 inches. Just because I've seen now what was done in the past and how it's not very feasible.
I'm surprised that a 3/4 inch would last 15 years. the rule of thumb, date myself, was 5 years for Second, Third, and Fourth Street because of the park traffic,
Mhm.
and 10 years for everything else. So that we got 15, we did pretty well with our 3/4 inch.
Well,
But I'm not sure of the difference in cost to go from 1 inch to 3 inches in terms of a project. You might know better.
it is quite a bit more. And so, but keep in mind though, it was Spruce Street. So that's not a heavily traffic point.
Right.
But since the building's been going on up there in the last 5 years, that could have had the big push on and why that's the 3/4 inch overlay.
And all trucks,
Yes.
they're much
Well,
bigger. now.
Dollstruck's been doing it ever since it's been paid. Too.
Not
Maybe not going up to the top as much, right, but. Yeah, so concrete trucks, all of that, it's all had a large portion.
How many millions, for storm drains and over how long a period of time roughly? Ballpark, just ballpark.
Just ballpark was $1 million worth of storm.
Would you think there's more to come?
I think there is.
1.5, 2 million?
Well, by the time it gets done, I always quote Julie's inflation factor. Yes, I'd say 1.5 over the 20 years at least.
Okay.
That's if we're aggressive with it.
All of the streets that are in their worst shape right now, were they all done around the same time or
No,
no?
no. What I recall is we paved Horizon Hill, I believe, when we did Spruce as well in 2010. I think we did Driftwood and maybe one of the side streets, like either 7th or 8th or something like that. It wasn't a whole lot. I was kind of new and that's when I started taking a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
And so that's how I know that it was. cheap.
Somewhere in my files, I have this complete street inventory and how many square feet each street is.
Yeah.
We just have that
You-
sent in the
Yeah,
email too, yeah.
That's part of this. I think there's almost 2
You don't need
million.
it, you already got it.
Mhm.
Was that the old Larry Blanchard?
It could have been. It could be from that.
Well, Dave, Rick and I put together this presentation that we gave to the Public Works and Streets Commission, and we're gonna evolving it as we prepare to take it to a city council work session. But I think we really want to make sure that we talk it through with the finance committee and really evaluate it all with the finance committee before we take it to the city council work session. Just to make sure that when we do propose a fee, that it's a really well thought out, really well researched, and really well considered from multiple different members of our public committees and advisory committees before we take it to that point, as we want to really make sure that it's well vetted. And so what we have put together is that the city staff is proposing a $10 a month fee to be added to each utility bill for every developed property, along with a consumer price index rate increase. And the fee would be specifically allocated for the maintenance, repair, reconstruction, the big projects for storm drains and streets. And it would be crucial for funding a strategic street maintenance plan over the next 1, 3, and 5 years.
Is this streets and storm drains?
Yes.
Or just streets?
Streets and storm drains.
And you've done the math. How much is $10 a month?
What did he, $117,000, I think is what it was.
There's 1,000 bills. Yeah, 20,
120,000, there's 1,000 bills.
if there is, so that's rough.
Yeah, so it's just a little bit under that, yeah.
And out of curiosity, I would kind of like to know why we decided to develop lots and not just meters.
Because the developed lots all have the meters. they're connected to the system.
People have meters, but they haven't built a house yet.
Well, they have to be connected, if they're connected to the system, is considered the developed lot. That's the terminology that I got from Bay City, who uses it, and they have, every meter connection, they consider developed because it's connected to the system. So the terminology we could change to make it our own, but was just based off of one of our case studies that we did.
If there are people in town that would really have a hardship
Mhm.
from this, can they apply for a waiver or a discount or something?
And
That could be something that could be considered, definitely. One thing, I mean, I sent you all, the, revenue funding forecasting, toolkit from League of Oregon Cities this week that the mayor pointed out, in our chairs meeting. I was listening yesterday to a little bit of the, part 2 in that webinar, and they said a statement that made, really stuck with me, and it's something that I've heard Tom say before. And I think it's important to consider when we're thinking about this, and every other time we're looking at taxes or fees or anything, is the squeeze worth the juice? And so is the effort worth the money that we're gonna get for it? Is the pain that anybody could feel worth it? I think it is. Our streets really need to be maintained, and our storm drains need to be maintained, but it's just that line really stuck out at me during the listening, while I was listening to that webinar this morning.
I like the infrastructure fee and put it on the tourists.
now we've had this fee before.
Yeah, that's right.
We had a capital improvement fee.
Mhm.
And there wasn't much pushback, as I recall.
There's no water answer.
So people were generally accepted of it. We had it for a number of years until we hired AAWU to do a water rate study, and then it went away. They didn't propose it to continue. But we did have it. It's called capital reserve fee, $5 for water, $5 for sewer. The question of these things is, who do you want to pay?
Exactly.
If we do a $10 a developed lot fee, 90%, 95% of the money will be paid back. And if that's really what you want, that's the way to do it. If you would prefer that it be allocated over property value, then you have an option to do what's called the local option levy. You can do a 10-year local option levy for infrastructure. That would be paid half by the large hotels and motels in town and half by the homeowners, roughly. This is where it gets to, is the squeeze worth the juice? Do you really want to nickel and dime the property on the hotel owners for more property tax by a local option levy? And do you want to put it to a citizen vote, which is what a levy requires? Frankie does really well with her option levies, but she's providing a different service.
What about the infrastructure fee from Lebanon?
Sorry?
What you saw in Lebanon, the infrastructure fee, couldn't that go to streets and sewers?
It could. I'd have to look into it more, so somebody could, but it could go wherever you wanted it to go. But they need water. They don't need streets and storm drains.
Well, I don't know how they're gonna get here.
Hold on, we'll get them here. They don't need our streets when they're here much. They use a 101.
Well, if it was called infrastructure, streets are part of infrastructure. It could go to all of the.
It could. So my input would be fee per meter or local option levy, depending on which audience you want to pay for the bill. And history would show that $10 a month, we didn't get a lot of pushback.
It's good.
But is $10 enough?
Well, is $117,000 a year enough? I mean, you know, with all of
That's not enough.
the amount that's being paid, that's what made me think is the squeeze worth the juice, you know, is that enough to put towards? And if we have the CIP being allocated at 115, I think is what we have over the next few years. What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah,
And looking at the numbers forecasted for the next little bit.
No, I don't see, as we're talking,
Mhm.
well, you know, that probably by the end of that 20 years, this plan, you know, that whatever's left to do, that stuff's gonna be outrageous, and we would, if we're at the end of the life of that storm plan, and the city's been working on it and stuff, they will have spent a lot of money on capital projects, and this is just for storm drains, which we don't do a whole lot of storm drain work. And now we're saying, hey, let's do some storm drain work. Now, where's that money coming from, right? So, yeah, it's a lot.
Mhm.
It's a lot.
When folded in the streets, to me, when I was preparing, it looked like 250 to 300 a year
Mhm.
to do street projects and storm drain projects. We used to thinking, oh, we can get by with 100 for streets. But when you pull the storm drain master plan, now you're at 250 and 100 is not really enough for streets, so maybe 300,000 a year. So a $10 fee would generate a third of that. What would you do for the other 2/3? You could continue the 100 grand a year from the general fund. Now you're at 2/3.
Mhm.
You still need another third. That's something to think about.
Mhm.
We could do combining these things. We could do a local option levy and position it as these are for these specific long-term projects. And we're gonna save up for 5 years, or it's gonna take us 5 years to collect it. And then we will do those projects. And in the meantime, you also are having your $10 a month as maintenance and general repairs. And so
Mhm.
whether people will buy that, I think the local option levy has to be really clear as to what the deliverables are.
Mhm.
It's gonna be make or break from that.
That was one thing that I really got out of the presentation is the how to get to yes is like just really laying it all out very clear exactly what the money is going to go for. And I think that, you know, a street fund, that to be very clear to what that's going for. And, you know, you could see how they're deteriorating, but any of those things like for the bigger projects, the sidewalks, you know, any, you know, bigger CIP projects or, you know, those are things that people really want too. So just making sure that we share that message is how we're gonna get to yes on that.
We should currently have 17 cents a thousand
Yeah,
for yachts.
yeah.
And it raises $48,000
Mhm.
roughly. So if you want to get 5 times that, you need 85 cents. That would get you 250,000. And you could look at the 85 cents along, what does Frankie charge for various levies? What does Walport charge for various levies? You know, the Central Coast Fire has one that's expiring and they want to know. There's a lot of these things going on because we're so limited in where we can raise revenue in the state. So I think in terms of 75 to 85 cents a thousand. There are lots of things on our property tax bill that are bigger than that. Or you could think in terms of, could we cobble together the projects into an urban renewal district for storm drains? I don't know where they're located, but it's possible that we could get a chunk of them in a URD specifically for that purpose and use the county's money to do it. That's possible. But we'd have to know where they are, plot them out on a map and look at it. Or as Mayor said, a suite of 3, urban renewal, utility fee, and an infrastructure fee.
2% would be over $300,000. Right?
You know, recently, the county and Walport and Lincoln City and I believe Florence even all raised their transient lodging tax from wherever they were to 12%. So all of our neighboring communities are at 12%. We're still at the 9.5%. Everything that they raised is still in that divide of 70-30. We're not nine, yeah. But their divide is still, even though they've gone up to 12, they still have that transient lodging divide. If we add in a 2% infrastructure tax, we are still lower than our neighboring communities, and we are getting that all 100%.
We need to look into that. Have a little, if I were a hotel owner, I would be saying, you're just getting around the transit rules.
Just a stupid-
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely is.
Well, to that point though, what advertising campaigns are any of us aware of that our hotels are doing that are visible? We don't see them. They don't do it,
Out of town.
but still,
Mhm.
you'd think they would have on their websites, they'd have their ads showing. People do
Yeah.
that, put their ads on their websites. I've never seen an ad anywhere. I haven't seen a billboard on I-5 like some cities have.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think a lot of them market through Travel Oregon
Mhm.
and occasionally via magazine, the AAA magazine, you might see an Adobe and an Overly ad in there.
Yeah, a lot of them like use Travel Oregon, Oregon Coast Visitors Association, those magazines that they take and they send all over the world. Yeah. Yeah, so different options, but the current challenge is we have a lack of funding for the projects that we need and the streets that we need to fix and to continue maintaining, and they're required repairs and upgrades that we don't have the dedicated funding source for in our budget. We do get the ODOT funds for streets, and we have our general fund contribution into streets reserves that just started again this last year. But there's been a period of years where there wasn't that contribution, and our streets were just getting the patches. And when was the last time when there was a full overlay on a street repair project?
I think it was 2010, other than the East Second Street.
Yeah, but that was a CIP, water
Yeah,
CIP, right?
it would've
Yeah.
been, I believe in 2010.
That's not a significant amount of time to not have
And
been
all
really.
of the roads reflect that.
Mhm.
All of them.
So Dave here gave us some of the maintenance needs, and we're working, been working on making a comprehensive maintenance plan that outlines all of the necessary work. And for example, the street budget is $73,000 for just the kind of necessary stuff, potholes, cleaning. Do you want to talk to this a little bit? Yeah.
For 2024, that was our budget, was 73.3, and 10.5% was spent just on pothole and backblading the gravel roads. And then we only have 3 guys,
Mhm.
and so on. Well, some new guys, but anyways, and then the next page.
Mhm.
Well, the 2025 is tracking about the same. A little more with the added staff and experience on it. And so, and then last year, or the 25 budget years, stuff was funded there at 110,000, I think, over the next 5 years, but the 25, somewhere I got lost there, but and maybe, yeah, 100,000 for 25, but next year's is showing that we're gonna need more. 26, which was 113, and those projects are just the leftovers from last year's schedule. And since we only had 100,000, that's what we had to cut it out. And it looks like I just got a word back again from the pavers that they're gonna keep the same price they quoted us for 26 for the stuff that didn't get done last year.
Right.
And part of this means that 9th Street is getting paved this summer. Well, before summertime, 9th Street and some of the other ones. No, wait, I'm sorry. All of the 25-year paving is basically very large patching and so on, holes here and there, large areas. In the 26th budget year, in the 100,000 or whatever we're given, 9th Street will be paved out of. Which that is the only full street that needs to be ground and repaved. And the goal is that the base will be good. And so, other than that, lots of large patching. Some of the other areas that were added for future paving, one of them was the intersection of 9th and King. That was not part of it, so that's gonna be added on to, that's where some of that extra 13,000 came from. We'll get a lower price with that, since it's gonna be, they're all gonna be doing the same street, and so they might as well go up and take out part of King Street at the intersection. We'll see a savings there, but the cost will be out. Anyways, so yeah, here's some good pictures of nice roads. I'd like to point out the rock in the middle. The first two are washouts from gravel roads right there. That is a common time sucker for public works.
And me too. I
wish
bring that all the
there.
time.
Leave that for public works too. But thank you for volunteering. But that all comes out, that's the top of Radar Road at the start of the paving, and it runs all the way down, very dangerous for people walking. There's a person that walks their dogs down there. If Julie walks too, but it's all coming for the most part around that corner on the last picture, which is, you see where that white line is, that is all gravel. The doll trucks have chewed out the pavement and ate it.
And I meant to respond to you that marking is not for a curb, it's to
Yeah, he
guide.
told me.
Yeah. It's a
They're gonna go right
guide.
over it.
I had an answer and I just didn't
They
do it.
fell off the side of the road Monday again.
Yes,
They
so, and then the side project of that is, a lot of times that rock does go in the ditch, but it fills up the ditch, and we just went up there again on almost an annual basis and cleaned out the ditch from all the rock that we put up on the road to start with. But that's scheduled to get paid before June, the upper part, so
Mhm.
hopefully that'll be a problem that's no longer experienced. And so on. These are typical blowouts right here, and some of that's along 101, and you know, we could fight ODOT and argue and this and that, but we're gonna pave it, get it done. And that shows what it looks like right there. Some more issues that we have. So. And again, this is up on Hanley. These are the worst areas, the very top of the top. More, the one on the third one there, that is, I believe that's Spruce Street right there. That's the 3/4 inch overlay. And I gotta tell you, the pavers were very surprised that it was blowing out down the center and not on the outsides.
Hmm.
And so on. But they said, yeah, that's just where everyone tends to be a little bit scooted over when they're driving down it. So that center lane is the section that gets the most tired. Capital improvements, that's kind of our guess for our estimation of what that's all gonna cost in the next 4 years. 270,000, but that's with water projects. Two projects.
So if the funds that were raised and were enough to cover the street maintenance and sidewalks maintenance, there's these, bigger goals that we have to do, sidewalks, on the phase 2 and phase 3, and the work that's gonna, go into just getting prepared to go for grants for that. There's gonna be investment that'll need to happen for that, but, I have here next to talk about a kind of a case study, but from Bay City and how what they did for street fees, but a big part of, the going for grants is being prepared with concept drawings to secure the grants, and that all cost as well, and city staff and time and engineers surveying, coordinating, utilities, so it's why we hope to have a large bulk of it done by grants. We have to prepare for that to go to the grant. And so I put out to all of the city managers on my email list and asked what cities have street and stormwater fees, and many do. And I used Bay City because they responded, and they're fairly close, coastal community, and they faced a similar situation with roads in very serious need of repair, but without a dedicated revenue source for proper maintenance. So in 2003, they introduced a street maintenance and repair fee, and that was $5 a month for each developed property due to their deteriorating road conditions and lack of funding. And the funds that were collected were utilized for minor repairs, such as repairs and matching funds for various grants to do larger projects. And the investment over time significantly improved the street conditions and improved the roads throughout the community. To communicate the fee and the fee being used, they would put large signs out saying your fee, your street fees at work. But now they really tuned to social media to share how their fee is being used on the different projects that are being funded with the street fee. In 2019, Bay City, after thorough debate, they increased their fee to $10 a month per property and installed the annual cost increase based off of the consumer price index. And that was a decision that they said, met with little to no pushback from the public, that they saw that the fee was being used for good projects. They felt like it was a very worthy investment. And they saw that the static fee was just not matching the steady increase of cost to do the work. And so that they put that consumer price index in, and have been very happy that they did that. So we did in September a resident sentiment survey online, and one of the questions that was asked was, which of the following areas would you be willing to pay additional fees for? Public safety and infrastructure, water, wastewater were of the top, but people are also willing to pay street and storm drain fees and other additional fees. I think the biggest thing from this is people are willing to pay additional fees. They're saying that they recognize that there's sometimes a need for additional services and fees, and they're there to do it. But you see that there's and many of those others were no extra fees, please. Not all of them. Some were saying they'd like more, they pay for recreation, they'd pay for streets or, trails, other things like that. Were you going to say something? Yeah.
I did have a question for another option for collecting fees.
Do you want to say now, or you want me to? Yeah. Yeah.
I own a house on the streets on three sides of it. And I was assessed 3 different times. We have not talked about street assessments. Eugene, for example, they do street assessments. And it gets very complicated collecting, et cetera. And the structures are difficult because they're different rates, whether they're called the minor arterial versus the arterial, so it's complicated. But it sounds like Eugene applies it mostly for major like gravel turning to pavement. I'd like to think that some of our projects that are going to be most expensive, some of that advantage should be borne by the homeowners who are going to benefit from it versus the property owners. versus the wholesale. So I think part of this formula may also be considering, depending on whether we're looking at doing work that's expensive for one portion of Radar Road, should that be an assessment?
Mhm.
They actually do have a whole, how can you get relief from it? There's a state financing program that for people 62 and older, that state will pay. We're at 6%, your fees accumulate at 6%, but you don't pay it until you sell the property. There's a pretty strict income limits, it turns out 46,000 a year, 62, and no other assets other than your property sector. So I'm just suggesting that as we look at the pile of projects,
Mhm.
that some of these may be more appropriate for assessment. We don't have any ordinance, there's nothing in our charter that talks about street assessments, so I don't know where we go with that. I don't know if other coastal cities have ever done that, but certainly some of the bigger cities do street assessment.
Mhm. Okay.
We did something like that with Horizon Hill when we did the LID. We created a local improvement district. We finished the developer's work, Munchke, put in a conduit for electrical, put in water lines and sewer lines. And then we billed the homeowners a pro rata share. And they had the option of paying upfront or paying so much twice a year for 10 years. And Kimmy would have to tell you how complex it is that chasing retail dollars is hard. I mean, you're always going to get people who don't pay. You get people who file bankruptcy. You get people who their lots were foreclosed and West Coast Bank had to pay us, somebody. So there's an administrative burden. The storm drain plan seems to align with LIDs because you can break them up to the drainage basins that they're in. So that's something you can think about. That might work. And we should always remember for a while, where we have $5 million of bond authority that we have never executed. We could bond a storm drain 2-year project. We could bond a water tank and we could pay it through property tax. Hate to do that, but it's out there. All the work's been done.
I'm sorry.
Get all the storm drains all at once.
Yes. Your staff be real good doing storm drain stuff.
Well, you know, it'd be mostly contract work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get all our streets done at one time too. You could do that.
If I may share a thought,
Mhm.
that's the thing about that storm drain and the streets is we want to have construction for 20 years. You know, sooner we get a bunch of it done, the better. Or in blocks
Mhm.
like that.
We've been living next to a construction site for almost 9 months now. It gets old after a while.
Mhm. Does. So here's the amount, 950, units at $10 a fee or $10 fee, $12 a month would be $114,000 a year revenue. So it's not all of the picture, but it could be a portion of the picture if we did, layered approach to this. But we want to make sure that the funds that were collected would be strictly allocated for regular street and storm drain repair. And that we would really be communicating and transparent about all of this along the way and really doing that public awareness to make sure that when we go to this point, they know exactly why and what the funds are going to, so it's not a surprise. So I think it, if it was to happen, that we would really need to be slow rolling enough to like where we've announced it enough times where people are aware of it and know that it's coming and what it'll be used for and like that. But I also think that in this conversation, we've had a lot of other options that have been thrown out that would be worth exploring as well. So maybe we keep noodling on this in the finance committee for a few months before we take it to city council. I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts on it?
What do you think?
I'd like to look into that thing that you saw in the Lebanon bill
Mhm.
and just see how they managed that.
I think here, since we've done this before, and it was relatively quiet, it didn't have a lot of noise associated with it. We abandoned it in 2021. We kept it up until the time that we did the new water rate. We have a perfect opportunity to say, we had this before. We put it on the shelf during COVID. Well, and we entertained a new water rate structure. We realized we didn't get a lot for our consulting dollars, and we've been noodling away at fixing the errors in it, like not charging the hotels a sewer fee. And this is another correction back to what it used to be and put it in place now and use the noodling to be the bigger ticket items like an LID or a URD, but I do this right away.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that either. Charge 25% more for vacation rentals.
Joe would say yes to it.
A few thousand more dollars.
Potential objection or concern would be, some people in public works that were concerned that the hotels are paying their full share.
Yep.
That they're paying $10 a month and they've got all these cars that are in town. Now, the hotels will say, yeah, they all just go on 101, they're not going on the side streets. I'm not sure that's true. You see driving up on my dead end street all the time.
I go to the parks.
But, so for a hotel, you pay $10 a month,
Mhm.
the same as a individual property owner. Question, is that fair?
Yeah.
And I'm not answering it.
I'm just gonna throw a devil's advocate out there just to think of both sides of the coin here. Where do we think the hoteliers could come with this and say, look, we pay because of our business on our places, your general fund, that's 60% of your general fund, that's more than any of your residents pay towards the general fund. Like just thinking of all of the different, arguments and concepts
They
that
don't pay it. We always keep in mind their
Yeah,
customers.
their
pay.
customers pay
Their
it, but
customers
because
pay
of their customers, our general fund is funded.
And I can't think that any hotel in Yachats would come in and say, I had four potential sales last week that didn't
Mhm.
book their reservation because your tax rate is 9%. They'd much
Yeah.
rather stay someplace where it's 12.
Yeah.
Just putting out there all the thoughts, just all the things to consider.
Dismiss
Yeah.
the voices that you're
Mhm.
referring to, but I've attended a lot of meetings for that commission and you've been
Mhm.
doing it now. There are a couple of minority voices that focus on this noise about hotels. And they want full parity of the rates with no considerations of anything else. I think it's short-sighted personally. If you're going to do that, it's something you should do with a structured program where you whittle away at it. And it isn't something you just do. So,
Yeah, and I do think, just as a thought too, like then I feel like there's like also a concern that could be felt just where the uncertainty of the world and where, people's finances and stuff are gonna be. I think that's definitely something that people are sensitive to right now that I've been hearing too. So all the things to consider. But we need to get this fund, we need to do these streets too at the same time, so.
Do you need us
We
to
have-
vote?
I don't know if we-
You need us to approve the CIP.
Well, we need to approve the CIP, definitely. This we can come back to.
Looking at this, because you're running out of time,
We are. Yep.
at a macro level, the amount that we're requesting for water is the same that we, basically the same that we requested last year.
Mhm.
And we have gotten or will have gotten half of the work done. So we appropriated $1,054,000, looks like we're gonna spend $572. So that's gonna get carried forward, and the new request is $1,005,000. And it's not another million plus the 500 that we already had, so I'm comfortable with $1 million.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. We're not greedy.
Mhm.
We're asking for projects and we're stretching them out a little bit, and it's not a complete catch-up of everything we didn't do. We managed our way through changing projects and living to the appropriation. To me, water looks fine. I don't have a lot of stake in individual projects because I'm not a skilled engineer. I'm a bookkeeper. And Dave and Rick can do this. And with Neil's help, they can get the right projects funded at the right time, living within $1 million appropriation. I'm happy. Wastewater. We funded $1,099,000. I would bet we don't spend it all, but this says we're going to.
We're gonna be close.
Okay.
I gotta tell you, that's the scariest thing I've ever been on this since I've been doing it.
It's touch and go, right? And asking for $794, it's a little less. We have some reserves. Not overly bothered by that. Looks okay to me. The one thing that we have to do, and then instead of worrying about delineators and things like that, I wish our Public Works Commission would sort out the rate structure between water and wastewater so that we get the reserves where they're needed. They're needed in water. You look at these projects in wastewater, they do tend to die off until they get really big at the end and start doing some major things. But I wish we could get the water rates and the sewer rates resorted among themselves. Homeowners don't pay anymore, it's just getting the right dollars in the right bucket. Wish they could do that for us. Streets, I'm presuming that Loma to River Road is only if we get a grant, $180,000. Is that correct? We're not gonna do it without a grant.
Yes,
Is that fair?
I believe that's the case. Mhm.
So we're asking for 180 in appropriation, but we're really not because of the grant.
I think that's the case.
Mhm.
You agree with that, Neil?
That's right, yeah.
So I don't have any problem approving the 325, understanding that when we budget this, we budget the grant at the same time. If we don't budget the grant, then we gotta take the 180 out. But it's fine to leave it in and just budget 180,000 in revenue. The only one that gives me concern is the 107,000 for wastewater. And the only reason it gives me concern is we still don't have a funding source. So if we're gonna do this, then I think we do this. We approve this CIP if we're gonna do the $10 fee. If we're not gonna do the $10 fee starting July 1st, I think there's enough, or October 1st, whatever. Then I'm a little concerned about appropriating $100,000 for storm drains until the master plan is finished and approved. I think you could probably take a year off on that 100,000 and not harm yourself. Because you don't have a master plan finished yet. Public Works hasn't accepted it and the council hasn't accepted it. Correct?
Correct.
So you could not spend that 107. You probably want to leave it 40. because that's tied to your Loma and River Road. And if you're gonna budget for that, you should budget for the 40, but the 60 for the Marine 101, what would be the harm in delaying that a year?
Wouldn't be any, because it's been there for several years.
I know.
A long time since Munchkin.
So personally, this is just one voice, I would say trim down storm drains until we resolve how we're gonna fund our storm drain master plan.
When's that plan gonna be done?
It's imminent, isn't it?
The
Master plan?
Well, there's 19 different projects I'm working on, and it's one of them. So I am working on it tomorrow. So
I didn't know it was you. Oh,
I would, my comment would be that the West Third Street is one street, but it really most of it. I'm not sure why, but I've always thought it's a pretty nice street, it's wide. People are concerned about the quality and the services.
yes.
So showing some motion on it.
We could certainly afford the 7,000 engineering.
Put some flags out.
So my question is to you all on this. Do we take this to the city council as is, in a couple weeks and say, this is approved contingent upon the $10 fee? Or do we, because we do have right now, as of now, we have the city council in May has a work session to discuss the street fee. And this needs to be approved though this month, so we can get the rest of our budgeting done. So we're getting kind of close there.
Well, it was brought up already at city council, right?
Was.
There was a couple people that were concerned about it,
Mhm.
but I didn't know it existed before. I think that really helps. Anybody who's been here a long time's already seen it.
Mhm.
Is it possible to get both through city council next? Have them look at this and say it's contingent on the $10 and then vote on the $10?
What are your thoughts on that?
Is it possible, you think it's possible at the next city council meeting to bring this and say, here, the 60,000's in here, but if you don't want the $10 fee, we're taking it out?
It's possible to do that.
Cause it's already been brought up, you're thinking about it.
Kind of hesitating, I'm not sure the realities that we have to approve the budget. I'm not sure who would contingent.
Maybe we should just keep them separate.
I think that $10 would cover your street work, and I think storm drains we put off till we have a other solution beyond just the $10.
So the $10 already being taken.
That's what I'm thinking.
Mhm. Okay.
And I know that, in the city hall, there's nothing significant there you're asking for. And parks and trails, we have a funding source. It's called the Visitor Amenity Fund.
Mhm.
So I'm not overly concerned about that. And the commons, I don't think there's anyone chomping at the bit to spend 300 grand without a grant. We're probably chasing some grants. Are we willing to spend $300,000 without a grant? If we are not, then we have to budget a grant. In the revenue side of CapEx.
I know that Rosa every day is looking for grant opportunities for commons related stuff. So we do hope to be bringing in as many grants as we possibly can, but there's not at this point any that landed. We did get a grant to work towards an ADA bathroom in the commons. So that is a revenue source.
Check the value of the reserve. $70,000. I'm gonna spend 300. Leave it as is, cut money. The library is all taken care of. The museum is 75% visitor amenity. 25% city. So it's got a funding source.
Sure. We voted to increase it.
Some of it's this year that we're still, we have,
I can certainly give up on the 60 because it's so insignificant to what we're approving. I think from my view, you have a CIP that is supportable.
What's in the reserves for storm drains? Get that open.
What do you think, Charles? You agree? Thank you.
I was like, wait.
It's a lot of work. And as we know, it takes longer to do things than we think. So we always have the fact that it's hard to get things done, that slows things down, which means you don't spend everything that you're planning on. So I'm comfortable appropriating this CIP and moving on to the budget process.
Leaving the 60 in for storm drains?
Yeah. I would love to see the 60 come out. If it's easy to take out, I'd take it out, but just defer that until we have a long-term solution for storm drains. But that's at 60,000 on $1,700,000 on $3,700,000 is insignificant. Doesn't matter. And we got total capital reserves of
So
$4,531,000 as we speak.
in total capital reserves,
You can spend a lot of it in this next year, but
okay. So my hearing from the group that Dave and Rick and I should make a presentation ready for the council to vote on in May, or excuse me, April for the $10 fee as a separate item of this, or should we do a work session and really talk it through with the finance committee and the council in May? What are the thoughts on how to roll it out?
Problem with the $10 fee.
Yeah, you think
and
you
before
take it to city council in April?
I lost in the shuffle, put it back in.
What are your thoughts?
I think that, I know that at least two of the councilors are very concerned about
Mm,
address how we're going to position it for the citizens. I think that should be part of your presentation.
mhm.
And what relief is available for citizens if they in fact can't afford it. I mean, we already have that system in place, so it's been through the presentation, something that we already have, but just to remind.
Did the Public Works and Streets Commission actually vote on this?
Yeah.
So we should not push back too hard on them because they've been reluctant to tackle their revenue side. I would love to see us support the fact that they took a stand and said, yes, we want to raise revenue.
These two are counselors that are going to consider.
Did they know that we had it before?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I hadn't heard that either.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anybody's been.
Maybe we
here
could get some
a long time.
stats pulled together on how long we had it before. Mhm. Anything else that we should add to that presentation for a real sell at home?
Oh, we did.
Mhm.
Like a timeline.
Had it from 2015 to 2021. History will tell us.
Our timeline was like, when we say, yes, we're going to do it, and what do we say before, why we're doing it, how much warning you get, when can you come and vent?
Or-
Per the League of Oregon Cities, I think, emphasizing that it has gone through two, as I'm saying, is it's gone through at least two commissions. Commission, it's been discussed in detail, we understand concerns.
All right, well, I'm gonna go coach soccer. Thank you all. Is there anything else that we should add in here before I officially adjourn the meeting?
Through it today, but I thought it was on there.
It was supposed to be on the agenda for today. It was on the agenda for today, but we did not receive it, the final draft. So
Is that not a surprise?
yeah, I gave her a April 1st deadline, but she was in the hospital. So. To be continued on that. Yes,
You and I had talked about a road district. I did
yes,
some more research on this.
yes.
Can't do it because road districts cannot be within a city limit.
Yeah,
That would have been a great solution, but
yeah.
you can't form one.
So we'll stick with the first Thursday at 2 o'clock for May
Yeah,
Finance
I like that.
Committee. Okay. And we'll continue talking about funding sources. I think maybe Kimmy can bring some information to us about the URD. I can talk to Dan Cutter about the URD. We can do some local levy option research and tax
Yeah. I'd like to
research.
Look at that. And
Is it legal? That was
Right.
one of the questions. Is it legal?
are we looking at a new auditor?
Yes.
That'll be coming
Mhm.
up fast.
It will be, yes.
Okay.
I think maybe in June, we could bring some applications and companies to look at.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
That'll sneak up on us.